Welcome back to the Energy Sovereignty Project and our closeout for the month of April. This format, for those of you who are just joining us, when we close out our month, we do 1 day a minute, so that way if you're interested in just getting the data, as most people are, without listening to my running commentary, you can skip ahead to each minute, front of the minute, the back of the minute, to get all of the data and the notes for that corresponding day. In this case, we'll be doing 30 days in 31 minutes. So let's get started. All right, well, let's pick this up on April 1st. No joke. So basically starting off in good shape, rainy weather, but we managed to get a decent production for that day, 22.8 kilowatt hours. The end of March was a little harsh. There's the notes. Managed to get 6 kilowatt hours to the vehicle. And again, like I said, the end of March was a little hard on us. We had several rainy days in a row, of which the first few days in April got us, started to get us out of that. And as you'll see here on the 2nd, again, rainy day, 26.3 kilowatt hours of production. It outstripped the home's use just a little bit, but remember, we're trying to drive as well, and so this gets us into a situation where we're not able to put as much charge back into the car. And here we have the notes. As you see, we had to pull it off of zombie apocalypse mode, going back on the grid here. Again, because of all of those days that had stacked up of rainy weather. And so we had a good run, 18 days in backup mode. And then on the 3rd, heavy driving today, 50.9 miles. But you'll note that the percentage charge at first solar contribution is 0. And so what that means is that we had completely depleted the system. So if you look down, at the total daily from the grid number at 0.6 kilowatt hours, we actually wound up just barely not making it. And so then here's what it says in the notes there too. Just almost made it. But at 7:15, just before first solar contribution, we wound up having to tap into the grid just a little bit. And then also that means that we weren't able to power the vehicle any longer. And so unfortunately that brought our run of driving on sunlight to an end, and then we'll have to reset that. And so April 4th, again, very cloudy weather. Because of the time of year, we're actually able to keep our home usage down. We're not using the AC system or any of that. The weather itself, from a temperature perspective, was very neutral. So we did wind up producing just slightly more than we used. Now, if you look at the daily from grid asterisks there, and so we didn't actually draw or put any power to the grid. Those represent, like I mentioned in the weekly update that we did for our first week, that those represented switching errors. And we'll take a closer look at those in a couple of months when we really start to work the system as far as exporting power to the grid. We'll take a closer look at what those mean in regards to losses. And again, rainy weather. Total solar day of 13%, and that is very low. And I knew right then that we might not make it to the next day, and obviously there's not going to be any charging to the vehicle for the 5th either, and that's what it shows here. No real vehicle information. And what we talked about in the notes, that if you had a single Powerwall 2, there'd be no way that you'd be able to avoid using grid power. And then the following day, did we make it? No. We didn't. Barely, though. We made it through most of the evening. As you can see, the total daily from the grid at 2.6 kilowatt hours. So solar got us through most of the morning. And then on this day we had a decent production, 37.1 kilowatt hours, with a home use of 20.8. And so then that gives us a total solar day of 29%, and so then that will be enough to get us through to the next day. And again, like it says in the notes, it's a good example of, no matter how much battery capacity you have, if you don't have the ability to produce solar to fill that capacity, then you're just not going to make it. And so then it just comes to a case of everybody needs to decide what they're trying to accomplish and how they want to accomplish it. If I had a farm out in the middle of nowhere, sure, we'll put a lot of solar on our land. Anyway, so April 7th here. So you'll notice in red we've got the minus 154.4 miles. Those are the number of miles that I put on the vehicle in those days between driving, when driving was recorded. And so what that means is that at the end of the year or the end of the month, however you guys want to calculate that, if you're trying to verify the numbers that I'm saying, what you'll do is you will subtract those red numbers. The red numbers are power that I've either gotten from supercharging or power that has been obtained from some outside source other than the Energy Sovereignty Project. $15 kilowatt hours to the vehicle to get it primed and ready for use. And again, at the start of the day, we brought the vehicle down to 5%. That was as low as I wanted to go with it, but that allows us to say, okay, well, we did get a fresh start. We weren't trying to say, oh, well, now we're charging off, we've got 250 miles on the vehicle, so now we're going to start using the vehicle. That wouldn't be honest. So back on zombie apocalypse mode here on the 8th. 20.3 miles of driving to the vehicle, 15 kilowatt hours. And again, this was a weird anomaly day. We had a little cutout of about 10 minutes that was unscheduled, and that turned out to be, or at least what we, near as I could come after talking with Tesla, is that was actually due to a software update on their part, that they did a push, and it actually shut the system off for about 10 minutes while it updated the software and then rebooted itself. And April 9th here, typical sunny day for this time of year. Boom, 57.5 kilowatt hours. Brought the system from 23% at first contribution all the way up to 76%, but then wound up charging the vehicle, and that brought it down a bit. And we got 30 kilowatt hours to the vehicle. This is where we were doing that driving test, showing how quickly the vehicle could recover. 10th. Partly cloudy, but still decent solar contribution. Again, a lot depends on when those clouds come through. If they allow a break in the weather around midday, then you'll get the lion's share of your accumulation. .27 kilowatt hours to the vehicle information there. 90% reached on the vehicle. That was our goal for trying to keep it up there. That's where I like to keep the car, because hey, if you need to drive someplace, especially, you know, somebody calls you, come to dinner or whatever, you need a little bit of charge on the vehicle. My personal comfort zone is about 90%. Yours may vary. And then the 11th, cloudy day, decent production, 36 kilowatt hours. It's quite a, if I remember correctly, April 11th was quite an overcast day. I seem to remember that I was pretty surprised that we'd gotten that much contribution. Again, still in zombie apocalypse mode. Not much driving. I don't do a whole lot of driving. Vehicle data. Again, ending at 89%, 90%. April 12th, 14 miles. I live fairly close to the studio, so unless I go out of town, most of my driving is relatively local. Real good production day, 57.7 kilowatt hours. Right in that high 50s to low 60s that we generally get this time of year. Home usage hasn't really kicked up yet. That happens a little bit later in the month. Nothing to the vehicle. Not for any reason other than it was still fairly charged. I wound up working kind of late, so the charge actually occurred on the following day, which was fine. That's what happens when you get home after midnight. Now, the interesting thing here is that I had a lot of driving planned for this day. Out and back, out of town, 173.7 miles. And so then you can see what I did here is if it's not too confusing there, did 21 kilowatt hours to the vehicle. Kind of an out and back there. And again, that's what we're showing here is that the total for that charge was the two charging sessions that I did, one in the morning and one in the evening when I returned after putting all those miles on the car. You don't want to leave the car and in a depleted state. That's not very good for the battery. And so on April 14th, you can see we're still in zombie apocalypse mode, but it's recorded as a 0% at first solar contribution. If you'll remember back in that weekly update, what I had done was I was bored on a Sunday and I thought, oh, well, let's do a recovery test. And so I actually was there monitoring the system, and as the notes will show here, I depleted the system. I did a drawdown test of the system, and I wanted to see at what point it would kick the system off. Would it go all the way to a shown 0%, or would it do something similar to what it does when you try and charge it fully and it'll get to between 95 and 98% with the grid disconnected, and then it'll kick it off. But when you discharge it, it does actually discharge all the way to 0. So that's good information to know. Again, still on zombie apocalypse mode, about 20 miles of driving. Rainy though, not a whole lot of contribution. We didn't quite match what we used, but this is why we have the batteries. If you have 1 or 2 power walls, you're not going to be able to do this. That's not to say that 1 or 2 power walls isn't bad. It's great, but it is what it is. If you're trying to accomplish energy sovereignty, not only do you need the capacity, obviously, of the batteries, but you also need to discharge the current supply. 5 kilowatt hours per battery. Most homes will need 3 just to match the normal load on the home. April 16th, still cranking along on zombie apocalypse mode. And again, you know, we had some decent production for the rain, and it all depends on when the rain comes through. In this case, if I remember correctly, it was rain in the evening, but it left most of the day free, so we were able to charge 18 kilowatt hours to the vehicle to support our daily driving. I need to be better about filling in notes daily. Some days are just days, I guess. Seventeenth, we're back to sunny weather. Again, that high 50s, low 60s production number. Home use at 23.8, 26 to the vehicle. 122 miles of driving. In April, I made several trips back and forth to the Bay Area. I think it was this trip I managed to bump into Eli Burton of My Tesla Adventure. That was kind of cool. Sitting there having an absinthe in Sausalito, and lo and behold, here he starts yapping with me. That was a lot of fun. Anyway, April 18th, heading back, and then obviously, you know, you get home and you want to be sure that you put some power right back into the vehicle. In this case, we did an immediate dump of 26 kilowatt hours, so just short of 100 miles. And again, like it says here, it was interesting that I was able to make it there and back. Doing a complete cycle of the battery isn't the healthiest thing to do to it. Generally, they like to be cycled in that 30 to 70% range. But it is a car. I'm going to use it. 19th, 26 miles. Went from 30% in the morning to 68%, and then discharged it back down to 29. Again, looking for that generally that 18 to 20% number. You don't want to exceed that in this particular system, so as you make sure you're going to make it through to the next day. Again, replenishing the power to the vehicle. Here we got the 20th, another 20 miles of driving, pretty typical for my daily driving when I don't lose my mind and go out of town. 28 kilowatt hours to the vehicle, again trying to bump that back up. Basically just what we were saying, recovering from a couple 100-mile trip. Now we got the vehicle back up to 89%, 90%. And the 21st, another 20 miles or so. Good solar production. Creeping up day by day. Nine kilowatts of the vehicle just to replace what we had used, basically. And then in the notes here, that's just what you see. Bumping that back up. Charging in the middle of the night. Again, this generally that's when I usually charge, and that's when I think most of you probably usually charge your vehicles as well. If you're on a time of use plan, you probably set it so that your vehicles will charge at midnight or early in the morning. Obviously charging off the batteries, that doesn't matter, but it's just generally what you do. You charge when you get home. Heavy driving, 99.7 miles. Again, I was heading out of town. And because of that, you'll see that 30 kilowatt hours to the vehicle. And again, on the notes, just what I said before. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the vehicle back to a more usual schedule of charging, rather than just relying on what the system can give me so much, but trying to charge it as all of us do in the evening. Also, as the notes said in that previous section, that in the case of a Tesla, that actually helps them out because it keeps the 12-volt battery healthy. First solar contribution to 38, ending at 89, and so here we go. Now we're getting into that time of year where you gotta figure out how you're going to use the power. In this case, 24 kilowatt hours was able to go to the vehicle. And then we also did a test of the air conditioning on the house. I wanted to make sure that even without the benefit of a soft start system, that we weren't going to wind up having any issues, and we didn't. Worked out fine. And now you'll see that new symbol there at the top, third from the left there. That's the air conditioning symbol. When you see that, it not only means that it's on, but I actually do, there will be some days where you'll notice that symbol is missing. If the usage of the home is conspicuously low, I'll go ahead and take a look at that and see if the AC system turned on at all. If it didn't turn on the entire day, I may remove that symbol for that particular day simply because it wasn't really applicable. I'll have to take a look at that. Anyway, data for the vehicle. Again, keeping it around 90%, charging it the previous evening, setting it up to charge. That's what I'd like to do on a regular basis. But obviously there may be times when that's not possible. Again, still running on zombie apocalypse mode. 36% to start off with, 76% at the end of the day. Decent production, but we also had a high consumption day. Those happen on occasion where we do some cooking or run laundry, that kind of a thing. In this case, 33.5. And then also part of, as the notes say here, part of what led to that coming back up to around 30 kilowatt hours is that's with the AC. The AC kicks on a couple of times and can drive it up pretty quickly. It'll start to peak once we get around August. Decent production day. Home usage of 76.6. I did not break that out for some reason. My apologies. It'll show on the next page here when we show the notes. I usually try and break it out on this page so folks can see it again. 33 kilowatt hours to the vehicle. I like to break those kinds of things out so people can see these at a glance. A lot of folks following along. I really appreciate that. They makes me realize that this is all kind of worthwhile to do. April 27th, getting to the end of the month here. Still good production. Daily home usage. Apparently I got lazy again. Didn't do the math for you. So there we have 17 kilowatt hours to the vehicle. The remainder of that was what the home actually used. Started off the day at 76%, but needed the vehicle for a longer trip, so charged it to 90%. Not sure why I added it that way, but I'm sure for some reason I felt it was important. And then 113 miles, C driven. And then daily home usage upon returning home. That's that 40 kilowatt hours to the vehicle to try and replace as much of what was lost as possible. This is one of those reasons why you really want to look for a range of somewhere around 350 to 400 miles, maybe even 500 or 600 miles eventually to these electric vehicles. That way it'll allow the batteries to remain in their sweet spot. I'm sure we'll get to those kinds of energy densities fairly soon, but we're not quite there yet. Twenty-ninth, good production, starting at 31, ending at 31, because we used so much. And again, this is one of those things where it's great to be able to fine-tune the system so that when you're sitting at that range in a time of year when you can rely on the solar production, those are basically your goals. You want to go ahead and put all of your extra, if you've got enough in the battery to get you through the evening, you want to put all of your extra into your cars. And the last day of April coming up here. There we go. Sunny weather. Again, good production. Six kilowatts to the vehicle, just to kind of replace what it used. And notes. Basic vehicle information there. There we are. That's it for the month of April. As you can see, it was a good month for driving. My apologies, I don't do as much driving as a lot of you probably do. What you're going to have to do as we start putting power to the grid, you're simply going to have to imagine that extra power as going into your vehicle and then decide how that applies to your particular situation. On average, we had about 43 miles a day of driving for the month of April, and so you can see also how that might stack up against the amount of driving you do. And that was the whole purpose of the Energy Sovereignty Project, to allow people to look at this data and then say, okay, well, this is how we're going to scale our system if we want to try and get off the grid to whatever degree possible. The biggest takeaway for me personally from the month of April was the disappointment that I had in our public utilities, SMUD. I was very disappointed that they then were going to try and charge their solar customers to make up for what they may potentially lose in revenue as people start to adopt home battery technology and actually turn their home into a power plant, as we have done. So that's about it. We'll cut this video off, and thank you for joining us. And as always, the best of luck with your own systems. And if this is something that appeals to you, please feel free to like and subscribe. Leave comments in the comment section. Our content is very much comment driven. And we will see you next time.